Hi everyone. Just wanted to go over our info from last week, move on to week 5, and then also go over some quiz questions. So in week 4, we talked about information technology, the use of IT in healthcare, data analytics, knowledge management, information governance. It's a big area, and if you didn't already get that from what we talked about during the week or what we looked at, and it's probably one of the areas that is growing the most in the industry. So if you have a specific predisposition to enjoy information technology work or interest in exploring that further, there is certainly a lot of work to be had in that sector and also different elements of it. So an area like cybersecurity, ethical hacking, those types of things, very important to the healthcare industry, but also the application side in the healthcare setting. So implementation of various types of systems like electronic health records, issues related to interconnectivity between systems, those types of things. So lots of areas there that folks can pursue. And if you do have an interest in that, there will be there are several information technology classes in the overall program, HSA program, but those things will be explored further, not only in the concepts classes, you'll dig in a little bit further, but then once you get into there are actually 3 information technology classes. 2 of them come out of the computer sciences school, and then one I actually teach in our school, data analytics. So you can dig into that a little bit further when we reach those. The one thing that I did want to talk a little bit about is the discussion. So in our discussion this week, we talked about big data, artificial intelligence in healthcare, precision medicine, all of these types of things. And I'm going to share some information that I have about myself. It's interesting because this All of Us study, which hopefully you dug into a little bit through the discussion board, but the All of Us study is really taking our genetic data and our health data and combining that to create a robust database of information so that we can start to do a better job of precision medicine, of personalized medicine for each patient. So I just thought, everyone has the ability to do 23andMe. They can range anywhere from, I think in order to get the healthcare section, it can be like I think $75 or $80 when they're on sale, up to like $150 regularly. But it's interesting. So this is mine. I happened to get one. My husband bought it for me for Christmas. So I happened to get one, and it actually gives you information about all of these different things. So, for example, late onset Alzheimer's, I have a slightly increased risk of that. When you get down here, obviously you can see for most of these things, there was outside of celiac disease, which I already knew about because I've been tested for that before. And then this Alzheimer's, most of mine didn't, there were no variants detected in my genetic makeup for any of these other types of conditions. Now, just because a variant isn't detected doesn't mean that I won't have that condition. That this would just make me more genetically predisposed to it. Unless it's truly a genetic condition, there are other ways to have these conditions. But so in the wellness section, it's interesting that it'll talk about that I'm less likely to be a deep sleeper. I'm likely lactose tolerant. I have the muscle composition that's common in elite power athletes, so maybe there's another career for me there. But just interesting information that can be helpful to not just me personally. Actually, if you see the advertisements that 23andMe is putting out now, they're saying that like between 50 and 80 percent of people change their habits based on what they find in these reports. So some like 80% of people make some change, 50% of people start to do various things to improve their health. So having this information is powerful for us as patients, as people, but it's also powerful for providers. So what they would do is take this information and combine that with their assessment of you, both subjectively talking to you about what you have going on, what symptoms you're having or not having, what's going on. And then objectively, where they're actually doing a physical exam and gaining other data points. So that's why this is all really important. But so I'm going to use, and this is the reason I shared this with you, think about this line right here. So I am at a slightly increased risk of late onset Alzheimer's. If that information were to get out, which obviously it's out, I don't really care personally, but let's say that was released to a life insurer or a medical insurer, or maybe just to the public overall, if I was in some position that would be problematic. This type of data can cause people concern when it is available publicly. So that's really one part of what I was getting at with the question. Do you have any concerns about this type of data being widely available or being put in through some type of a research study? Because as we know, there are lots of laws in place to protect our data, but that doesn't always happen. There are hackers, there are breaches of security, those kinds of things happen regularly. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. And how important this data can be, though. There's so much upside to these types of data reports that it really is improving our health. The other part is the artificial intelligence piece. So what artificial intelligence would do is take that data, for example, that information there, it would combine it with other types of other people's data. It would combine it with other research that's out there, perhaps maybe research on how to avoid Alzheimer's disease. So artificial intelligence would learn, hence the reason it's artificial intelligence, rather than having a person that looks at all the data points and makes decisions. An intelligent system will learn from these data points through an algorithm, and it'll continue to get smarter and smarter, so that I might be able to push my data out there, and the algorithm itself, rather than having a physician tell me, okay, you need to stay active mentally, you need to do puzzles, you need to do all these different things, rather than that occurring from a physician, I might hear that right from my computer when I plug in all of this information. So that's where artificial intelligence can be a little bit scary, because it can take over the work of others in these fields. If any of you, it's not likely that you guys have seen this, but there was a show on HBO called Silicon Valley, and toward the end of that, the last two or three episodes, actually probably the last season, so maybe 6 episodes, had a situation with artificial intelligence, and how the artificial intelligence kind of took over their company. And it was funny, and it was in jest and all of that. But those types of things are scary, and there are a lot of people that are fighting against these types of initiatives because of that fear. So just worth kind of taking a look at. Hopefully everyone got their infographics in okay. Obviously I have not graded them yet, but I know that some folks had some issues with the files and whatnot. As long as you've given me a link that I can access, or the low quality copy of the file, or even if you just took a screenshot, as long as I can see the whole thing, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. Sometimes folks will take a screenshot on their laptop and I actually can't see it because once I blow it up, it becomes really blurry. If that's the case, I'll just reach back out to you and hopefully walk you through what you need to do to get me the file that I need. So let's take a look at the quiz questions. So our quiz questions for this week, there were only a couple. Folks did well on the quiz generally. So software applications in healthcare have traditionally been used to manage. So the answer is healthcare expenses. Most folks chose clinical operations if they didn't choose healthcare expenses. But we did talk about, in the book it's talked about, in the live class I do talk about it in the classroom too, but we talked about how clinical operations were probably some of the last to get into software applications. People on the clinical side have been very distrustful of these types of applications to use in their settings. So even something like an electronic health record didn't really catch on until the government started giving people money to purchase them. But on the business side, so the expense side of things, financial management systems, we've been using computers to do that since I've been in the field since the early 90s, and we used them back then. So, but it wasn't really until much later when we started seeing clinical staff or clinical operations use software applications to manage their areas. Computer systems were not used initially by clinicians because early systems, lots of different answers here, obviously, but the one we're looking for is that they took more time to use and were cumbersome to use. The notion by clinicians was that it took them much more time to fumble through these systems and figure out how to put in data. Much of the early systems were very text-based, narrative-based, so they were cumbersome and difficult to use. Now, with newer systems, we see where there are click boxes, templates, so physicians and nurses and other providers can actually just click through the chart and get the information in there that they want, with a small narrative box where they can type in some additional info. But much easier to use, much more user-friendly, and that's where we are now, much different than where we were many years ago. The last question, the delivery of healthcare lends itself to automation because and again, lots of different answers here, but generally, I mean, it doesn't necessarily include workers that are comfortable with the use of technology. Some are very tech savvy, but not all are. It lends itself because it is expensive. Well, no, it is expensive, but that doesn't have anything to do with automation, the delivery of healthcare and automation. It is heavily regulated. Again, it is heavily regulated, but that doesn't really have a lot to do with automation. But includes many repetitive workflows. That's our correct answer. And the fact that there are so many things that providers or administrators, finance folks, billing folks, all different care managers, all different aspects of the operation. They have a lot of things that they do time after time after time in exactly the same way. So, for example, in the physician practice realm, even back many years ago, 20 years ago, we used to give physicians templates, paper templates, or actually cards, laminated cards that they would keep in their pocket, and they could pull out and read certain statements that needed to be added to the medical record to support documentation with a resident or to support various different things. So those types of repetition, back then they were dictating, so they would read it off their card, but now there are macros built into electronic health records where they can click, shift 5, and it'll give them exactly what that keystroke combination will give them the language into the document that they need. So these type of repetitive workflows really lend themselves to automation. So those are all the questions that we have. Let's go back to the classroom quick. So in week 5, we're actually moving into our next functional area. We're going to talk about human resources. So human resources, interestingly, is one of the areas that many of our graduates find themselves interested in at the end of their program. So hopefully you'll find this week interesting, and if it's something you want to pursue further, you'll certainly get more content in the concepts class, as well as we do have a separate freestanding HR class that you'll take in the HSA program. So hopefully you'll enjoy those if this is an area that you're interested in. HR is a very important area. We need folks working in HR that are good, can be good judges of character if you're tasked with interviewing potential candidates. It's fairly easy to interview, high-level managerial candidates, but when you have a pool of, 85 staff people to pick from, sometimes it's hard to pick. Maybe they all have exactly the same background. So it's hard for HR to kind of weed through that and pick out which folks they want to send on to the hiring manager. But that's their job. So, maybe they do a short telephone interview with them. Maybe they look at what is outstanding on their resume, important things like, you were selected to an honor roll while you were in college, or Dean's List, or you were selected to an honor society, those types of things. outside activities that you may list. Maybe you're very into volunteer work or those types of things. So anything like that that can separate you is important to the HR department because it tells them a little bit more about you than they know about other people. I once had, just as an aside, I used to do a lot of running. My husband and I used to run marathons and half marathons almost every weekend. Sadly, I'm not doing that so much anymore, but I'd like to get back to it. Anyway, I had applied for a job once. Um, and I almost, no, it wasn't the RMU job, but it was around that time. It was when I was looking to move into academia full time. And it was another organization that I interviewed with. And so somehow we got talking about that in our interview. And they said how impressive they thought that was, that it showed that I had, grit and tenacity and would really stick with something, that I would run marathons like that and so often. So even just sharing things like that, if you're trying to fill some space on a resume, most of us aren't because there's already a lot of space filled, and we want to keep them short. But if you are looking to fill space, things like that can tell a little bit more about your story. You can add. And then on the flip side, as you're in HR, you can look at things like that and think, we really want someone that's a hard worker, that, is going to stick to their work, that has a good work ethic. This person runs marathons. They might have that. If they are all, everything else is the same across what they're looking at. So same with, if you play collegiate sports or involved in leadership activities or are, really involved in like drama or music. It shows those things show different things about your personality and can be helpful to HR. On the flip side, again, when you're in HR, you see those things that can tell you a little more about the person. This week we are talking about, in the discussion, about shortages, healthcare worker shortages, but then also employee retention problems. So we have a shortage of people to fill positions, and when we do fill them, people aren't sticking around because burnout is really at all-time highs. So just looking for folks to share their ideas on that. Also, we have another group assignment. I will remind everyone to please, everyone get to work early, at least dividing up work and talking about what you're going to do. And then also in the long run, it needs to be a group submission from everybody. When one person submits it to the classroom, it'll copy to everyone else in the group. So everyone needs to have signed off on that before you move forward and submit it. And we do have the self-and peer assessment. So we're going to do the self-and peer assessment again like we did with our last group project. And then our quiz and our ed puzzle. So that's what we have for this week. If you have any questions on anything, as always, please feel free to reach out. Okay, thanks.